Hey guys, how you doing? So I just wanted to briefly talk about the big word game. The big word game. So this is a phenomenon where you see people who want to impress you, they will use $10 words instead of $1 words unnecessarily. Most of the time in most conversations, you can explain a lot of concepts. You can explain how you view something without having to resort to a very esoteric terminology. Rare exceptions, perhaps you're dealing with some very advanced concepts in the sciences or software development, but generally speaking, when somebody starts laying out all these giant big words, typically they are used not to convey a message, they're actually used to obfuscate. They're used to create a little cloud, to create a mirage, to impress you as well. Big part of it is impressing you. So I've seen some politicals recently, they're out there using the big words, and they're using very big words, as I said, unnecessarily. And you can see, if you look at the comments under the videos, we got the politicians who are big word users, they will get, all of their supporters will be gushing about how intelligent they are because they use big words. Now, a lot of times they're using big words to explain very, very simple concepts. That's the thing. You see these long word salads strung together, and they could have just said something very simple. But again, it's not because they're not using these big words and these this complex structure of a sentence, of a conversation. They're not using that because they need to use it to explain some nuanced complexity. They are using it to impress you. They're using it to create an air of sophistication, which oftentimes is not there. One of the oldest rules I've learned in software development, in martial arts, in business, simple is hard. Complex is easy. Let me say that again. Simple is hard. If you are really a master of what you do, you can express that which you do, whether it be writing software, building businesses, combat sports, combat. Complexity and execution in complexity is difficult. See, I just did one of those little tricks where I used an unnecessarily complex phrase to explain that simply, if your moves in martial arts, for example, are very, very complex, that shows a lack of ability on your part. The great masters in martial arts can execute quite simply. Steve Jobs was famous in that regard when it came to business and products. He kept trying to simplify, This is an Asian principle. Well, at least I learned it from the Asians because of my martial arts background. And I think Steve Jobs got it from the Asians as well. Buddhist implementation. Same thing in software development. If you're writing software, when I would review the code of somebody who would come work for me, I would check out the code base that they write. I would check out the code that they were writing, and I would say, is the code that they're writing simple or is it hard to understand? If it was simple to understand, then I knew they were effective developers. If the code that they wrote was hard to understand, I knew that they were not as effective. You see, the best code is the simplest code. That's one of the reasons why code generators, including vibe-coded AI coding, is problematic, because it can be very, very complex, needlessly complex. So there you go, my friends. I hope you learned something from this. The key lesson here is, number one, simplicity is key. Number two, execution via simplicity, or doing something simply, shows tremendous skill and talent in whatever you happen to be doing, business, coding, fighting. And when you hear people string together $20 words where they could be using $1 words, when they're stringing together $20 words in a complex sentence structure, that tells you they're BSing you. You may have heard of the fail fast idea in business and entrepreneurship. The VC world, the venture capital world, when they're dealing with startups, that became like one of the buzzwords, one of the buzz techniques, if you will, in business. And any old school entrepreneur, like your Uncle Steph here, knows that as well. Because you never know at the end of the day, whether or not your business idea, whether it be a product or service, whatnot, you don't really know for sure if it's going to work. I've been at this for well over 30 years, like 35 years in businesses. And I started up little businesses. Some did well, some didn't do so well. And the key thing I learned in my very first business, which had nothing to do with technology, in my very first business, I had products, water purification products, hybrid bacterial strains, zeolite resins, synthetic resins, carbon, etc. So I had an array of products, like 9 products. Could have been 8. Anyway, I had a lot of products. And I had them in little jars. And we thought that product A was going to do fantastic. That was going to be the bee's knees. That was going to do it for the business. And as it turns out, it was product D that actually did all the sales for us. And I started seeing this over and over again, even though we were quite knowledgeable about the industry. But over and over again, we would run across situations where the product we didn't think would do well, did well, and vice versa. It's a cliche. You hear about it with big bands. They didn't know that this particular song here was going to be the hit, Sometimes they did, but a lot of times they don't. So that's where the fail fast idea comes from, because you want to spend as little time and money discovering whether or not the product is going to work in the marketplace. So that's what fail fast comes from. You put it out there as quickly as possible. You want to see whether it's going to fail or not. This way you can move on to the next thing, or you can plow ahead with it. The biggest mistake that a lot of the biggest mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make is they hold too long onto an idea or product. And they take way too long, they spend too much time perfecting it. Bad way to go. Yeah, that's the other thing about fail fast, is that you don't really know what the user is going to want. You don't really know what they're going to want a lot of the times. So you don't want to invest too much in perfection of the product initially, because you want to get that feedback from the client as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. So when I'm putting out, like, I have a fitness over 50 program, Fit Over 50 program, and it's AI supported. It's based on a keto adjacent psychology-based methodology of getting in shape. Different from anything else I've seen out there. Anyway, point is that I don't know exactly what people are going to want, what aspects of it is going to be important to them or not. So I put out what I need to just to be able to do a proof of concept, the POC, the proof of concept, to see whether or not it actually, how I present it initially, if it's going to be acceptable. So my last big project was something called Studio Web, which is an educational platform, interactive training platform, and classroom management tools. But I sold it to many schools and districts over 14, 15 years now. And the first version that I conceived of, came out of my head, it was like maybe 60% of what was required before the schools found it really useful. But there's a lot of work that had to be done to make it really production ready, so that I could get into many more districts. Yeah, so again, light and nimble, super quick, get in there. That's why I talk about, when it comes to software development, you don't want to spend too much time on perfect code with the first iteration. You want to come out with quick and dirty code, no use case tests, because you're probably going to have to change your objects model quite a bit from the first iteration to the final production one. Quick and dirty, man. So there you go. That's the point of this video.